The hospital cafeteria smelled like burnt coffee and antiseptic when Fiona Kennedy first saw him again. 20 years older and infinitely more tired than the energetic teenager she remembered from her high school chemistry class. Zander Ingram stood in line ahead of her, his expensive suit wrinkled and his dark hair disheveled, staring blankly at the sandwich options like they held the answers to questions he had forgotten how to ask. Fiona recognized him immediately. How could she not? That same determined jaw, those intense gray eyes that used to light up when he solved a particularly difficult equation. She had been his teacher for only 1 year before budget cuts eliminated her position, but some students stayed with you forever. "The turkey is better than the ham," she said softly, stepping closer. "Trust me, I have been eating here for 3 weeks straight." Zander turned, confusion flickering across his exhausted features, then recognition dawned, slow and uncertain. "Mrs. Kennedy." "Just Fiona now," she said, managing a small smile despite the heaviness that had settled in her bones. "I have not been a teacher in a long time. What are you doing here?" He grabbed a turkey sandwich without looking at it, his attention fixed entirely on her. "My father had a stroke. He is upstairs in the ICU." The words came out matter of fact, a practiced response she had given to nurses and doctors for weeks. "What about you?" Something shifted in Zander's expression, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with the confident businessman he appeared to be. "My mother. She collapsed at work 2 days ago. They are running tests, but it does not look good." They ended up at a corner table, neither of them particularly interested in the food they had purchased. Fiona studied him carefully. The boy she remembered had been brilliant but rough around the edges, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at the textile factory. He had worn the same 3 shirts in rotation and brought peanut butter sandwiches in wrinkled paper bags. Now he wore a watch that probably cost more than her annual rent. "You did well for yourself," she observed. Zander glanced down at his hands, at the expensive watch. "I started a pharmaceutical company 12 years ago. We developed a new treatment for autoimmune disorders. The FDA approved it 5 years back, and everything changed after that. I always knew you would do something extraordinary." Fiona meant it. She had written him recommendation letters for every scholarship application, had stayed after school to help him prepare for the chemistry Olympiad, had fought with the school board when they wanted to cut the advanced science program. "You are the reason I went into chemistry at all," Zander said quietly. "I was going to drop out, get a job at the factory with my mother, but you told me I was wasting my potential." Fiona remembered that conversation, remembered the anger in his 15-year-old eyes when she had refused to sign his withdrawal papers. "You told me to mind my own business. I was an idiot." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "But you did not give up. You found me that summer internship at the university lab. You helped me apply to colleges I did not even know existed. And you repaid me by never visiting after graduation," she teased gently. The smile faded. "I wanted to, but after my first year at MIT, everything moved so fast. Undergraduate research, graduate school, the startup. I kept thinking I would come back when I had really made it, when I could show you that your faith in me had been worth something. And then suddenly 20 years had passed." They talked for 2 hours in that depressing cafeteria, sharing updates about the patients upstairs, avoiding the heavy topics that had brought them there. Fiona learned that Zander had never married, that his company now employed over 3,000 people, that he still remembered the periodic table song she had taught the class. Zander learned that Fiona had left teaching after a series of budget cuts, that she had spent the last 15 years working as a consultant for educational nonprofits, that she lived alone in a small apartment downtown. When visiting hours resumed, they exchanged phone numbers with the unspoken agreement that they would need the company in the difficult days ahead. Fiona's father, Gerald, had been her rock after her mother died 10 years earlier. A retired carpenter with calloused hands and an easy laugh, he had taught her that love meant showing up day after day, even when it was hard. Now he lay motionless in a hospital bed, half his face slack from the stroke, fighting to come back to her. Zander's mother, Patricia, had given everything to raise him alone after his father left when he was 3. She had worked brutal hours, sacrificed every comfort, pushed him toward opportunities she had never had. Now her kidneys were failing, and the doctors spoke in careful tones about dialysis and transplant lists and realistic expectations. Over the next 2 weeks, Fiona and Zander fell into a routine. They met for coffee in the morning before visiting hours, shared meals in the cafeteria, took turns sitting with whichever parent needed company when the other had to step away. The hospital became their entire world, a bubble where the past and present merged into something neither of them had expected. "Tell me something real," Zander said one evening as they sat in the hospital courtyard, desperate for fresh air. "Something that is not about sickness or fear or waiting." Fiona thought for a moment. "I almost got married once. His name was David. We were engaged for 8 months, had the venue booked, sent out invitations. 2 weeks before the wedding, he told me he had been in love with someone else the entire time. Jesus, what did you do?" "I canceled everything, ate an entire wedding cake by myself, and spent 6 months teaching English in South Korea." She laughed at the memory, though it had devastated her at the time. "Best decision I ever made. I learned I did not need someone else to validate my life." "But you wanted to get married." "I wanted partnership. I wanted someone who chose me every single day, not just when it was convenient." Fiona looked at him directly. "What about you? Why no Mrs. Ingram?" Zander was quiet for a long moment. "I was engaged too. Her name was Claire. We met in graduate school, got engaged right after I started the company. But as the business grew, she wanted me to be someone I was not. She wanted the CEO who attended galas and sat on nonprofit boards and played golf with investors. I just wanted to be the chemist who loved solving problems." "So what happened?" "She gave me an ultimatum, the company or her. I chose the company." He ran a hand through his hair. "Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake, if I should have compromised more." "Did you love her?" "I thought I did. But looking back, I think I loved the idea of having someone. Of not being alone." He met Fiona's eyes. "That is not the same thing, is it?" "No," Fiona said softly. "It is not." 3 weeks into their vigil, Gerald began to improve. His speech returned slowly, garbled at first but growing clearer each day. The physical therapists said he would need months of rehabilitation, but he would recover. Fiona cried with relief in the hospital bathroom, letting the fear she had been holding finally release. Patricia was not as fortunate. The dialysis was not working as well as the doctors hoped, and her name moved up the transplant list, but there were no guarantees. Zander grew more drawn, more desperate, throwing money at every possible solution while his mother grew weaker. "I can save thousands of people with my drugs," he told Fiona late one night, his voice breaking, "but I cannot save her." Fiona took his hand, a simple gesture that felt monumental in its intimacy. "You are doing everything you can, she knows that. It is not enough. It never feels like enough when it is someone we love." The touch lingered longer than it should have. Fiona became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth of his palm against hers, of the way his eyes held hers with an intensity that had nothing to do with their current crisis. She pulled away gently, confused by the flutter in her chest. This was her former student. Yes, he was 38 now, a grown man who had built an empire, but the power dynamic of their past relationship felt like a line she should not cross. Even though that dynamic had dissolved decades ago, even though they met now as equals, the history felt significant. But Zander did not seem to share her hesitation. Over the following days, she caught him watching her with an expression she could not quite name. He brought her favorite tea without being asked, remembered small details she mentioned in passing, found excuses to sit closer than strictly necessary. "I value our friendship," Fiona said carefully one afternoon, trying to address the growing tension between them. These past weeks, having you here, it has made everything more bearable. Friendship, Zander repeated, testing the word. Is that what we are calling this? What else would we call it? He held her gaze. I do not know yet, but I know that when I am with you, the fear does not feel so overwhelming. I know that you are the first person I want to talk to in the morning and the last person I want to see before I leave at night. I know that I have not felt this way about anyone in a very long time. Fiona's heart raced. Zander, I was your teacher. 20 years ago, for 1 year, you were 26, I was 17. Now you are 46 and I am 38. We are both adults who have lived entire lives since then. People will talk. Let them. He leaned forward. I am not asking you to decide anything right now. I just need you to know that this matters to me. You matter to me. Before she could respond, a nurse rushed into the waiting room. Mr. Ingram, your mother is awake and asking for you. They hurried to Patricia's room. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, tubes and monitors surrounding her, but her eyes were clear and focused on her son. Baby, come here. Zander sat beside her, taking her frail hand carefully. I am right here, Mom. I need you to stop looking so tragic, Patricia said, her voice weak but firm. I am not dead yet. You are going to be fine, Zander insisted. Maybe, maybe not, but either way, I need to tell you something. She glanced at Fiona, who had hung back near the door. Is that Fiona Kennedy? Your chemistry teacher. It is, Mom. She has been here visiting her father. Come here, dear. Patricia gestured weakly and Fiona approached. I never got to thank you properly for what you did for my son. You changed his entire life. He did that himself, Fiona said. I just pointed him in the right direction. You did more than that. Patricia's eyes moved between them. I see the way he looks at you. I have never seen him look at anyone like that before. Mom, Zander protested, embarrassed. Hush, I am dying. I can say what I want. Patricia managed a small smile. Fiona, my son is brilliant and stubborn and sometimes too focused on work, but he has the biggest heart of anyone I know. If he cares about you, and I think he does, that means something. Fiona felt tears prick her eyes. Mrs. Ingram, you should rest. I will rest when I am dead. Right now I want to make sure my boy does not let something good slip away because he is too proud or scared. She squeezed Zander's hand. You have spent your whole life trying to prove you were worth something. You have nothing left to prove. Be happy. That is all I want. The conversation exhausted Patricia, and she fell asleep soon after. Zander sat with her for another hour before the nurses urged him to go home and rest. Outside, in the parking lot illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights, Zander turned to Fiona. She is right, you know. I am scared, not of my feelings for you, but of ruining this. You are important to me in ways I am still trying to understand. Fiona stepped closer, letting herself be vulnerable for the first time. I am scared too, but I have learned that being scared does not mean we should not try. What are you saying? I am saying that when I am with you, I feel seen in a way I have not felt in years. I am saying that you are not my student anymore and I am not your teacher. We are just two people who found each other at exactly the right moment. She took a breath. I am saying yes to whatever this is between us. Zander's smile was brilliant, transforming his exhausted features into something joyful. Can I kiss you? You better. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing the waters of this new territory. Then it deepened, weeks of tension and connection finally finding an outlet. When they pulled apart, Fiona was breathless and smiling. I did not expect this when I walked into that cafeteria, she admitted. Neither did I. Zander rested his forehead against hers, but I am grateful for it. For you. They started dating properly after that, though their courtship was unconventional. Dates happened in hospital cafeterias and parking lots, stolen moments between family obligations. But every moment felt precious, charged with the knowledge that life was fragile and love was rare. Gerald continued to improve steadily. Within 6 weeks, he was transferred to a rehabilitation facility, working daily with therapists to regain his mobility and independence. Fiona visited every day, often bringing Zander along. Gerald took to him immediately, appreciating his directness and obvious devotion to Fiona. "He is good for you," Gerald told his daughter one afternoon while Zander was getting coffee. "I see you smile more when he is around." "He was my student once," Fiona confessed. "Does that bother you?" "Was he a child when you taught him?" "No, he was 17, in high school." "And you never had inappropriate feelings for him then?" "God, no, he was a kid, I never thought of him that way." "Then I do not see the problem. You are both adults now. You found each other again as different people." Gerald patted her hand. "Your mother would have liked him. She always said you needed someone who could match your intensity." Patricia's condition remained precarious. Some days were better than others, but the overall trajectory was decline. Zander hired the best specialists, explored every treatment option, but there were limits to what money and medicine could accomplish. Through it all, Fiona stayed beside him, offering quiet support that asked for nothing in return. "Why are you doing this?" Zander asked one particularly difficult night after Patricia had been rushed back to the ICU. "You barely know her, you do not have to spend your evenings here." "I am not here for her," Fiona said simply. "I am here for you." That was when Zander realized he was in love with her. Not the tentative attraction from before, but the deep, settled certainty that she was his person. The one he wanted beside him through every crisis and celebration, every ordinary day and extraordinary moment. But he did not say it. Not yet. Not while everything was so uncertain. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Gerald, now well enough to do computer research from his rehabilitation facility, had been reading about living kidney donation. When Fiona visited one afternoon, he had a determined look she recognized from her childhood. "I want to get tested," Gerald announced. "Tested for what?" "To see if I can donate a kidney to Patricia." Fiona stared at her father. "Dad, you just had a major stroke. You cannot be a donor." "The stroke affected my brain, not my kidneys, and I have been reading the medical requirements. I am 68, which is not too old. I am healthy otherwise. I have a good chance of being a match." "Why would you do this? You have never even met her," Gerald's expression softened. "Because she gave the world the man who makes my daughter happier than I have seen her in years. Because she is a mother who sacrificed everything for her son, and I understand that kind of love. Because I can, and that means I should." Tears streamed down Fiona's face. "Dad, it is major surgery. There are risks." "Life is risk, sweetheart, but some things are worth the gamble." When Fiona told Zander, he was overwhelmed. He insisted on meeting Gerald immediately, driving to the rehabilitation center despite the late hour. Fiona watched as the two most important men in her life talked, seeing the easy respect that formed between them. "Sir, I cannot accept this," Zander said firmly. "The risks are too significant." "With respect, son, you do not get to make that decision. Your mother needs a kidney and I have two perfectly good ones." Gerald smiled. "Besides, if things continue with you and my daughter the way I think they will, we are going to be family anyway. Might as well start acting like it." The testing took 3 weeks. During that time, Fiona and Zander's relationship deepened. He took her to his house for the first time, a stunning modern place in the hills that felt oddly impersonal until she realized he barely lived there. He was always at the office or the hospital, treating his home like a hotel. "You need more color," Fiona said, looking at the gray and white living room, "and maybe some plants, possibly a pet." "I am never here," Zander pointed out. "Maybe that is the problem. A home should be a sanctuary, not just a place to sleep." She turned to face him. "When was the last time you took a day off, not for a crisis, just because you wanted to?" "I do not remember." "That is what I thought." Fiona took his hand. "Zander, you have built an incredible company, you have helped countless people, but you cannot pour from an empty cup. You need to take care of yourself too." "I do not know how to do that." "Then let me teach you." They started small. Sunday brunches that had nothing to do with hospitals or work, evening walks through the neighborhood. Cooking dinner together in his sterile kitchen, slowly adding life and warmth to the space. Fiona brought plants and colorful throw pillows, gradually transforming his house into a home. One evening, while they were washing dishes together, Zander said quietly, "I love you." Fiona's hands stilled in the soapy water. She turned to look at him, seeing the vulnerability and certainty in his eyes. "I love you too. I know the timing is terrible. Everything is so uncertain right now." "The timing is perfect," Fiona corrected, "because this is real life. There is never a perfect moment. There is just right now and choosing to love each other anyway." They kissed, and it felt like a promise. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Gerald turned out to be a compatible donor. The surgery was scheduled for mid-October, 8 months after that first meeting in the cafeteria. Both families were nervous but hopeful as the date approached. The night before the surgery, they all gathered in Patricia's hospital room. She had been stabilized enough for the transplant, though she remained weak. Gerald had been admitted that morning, cheerful despite the circumstances. "This is the strangest family dinner I have ever had," Patricia joked, looking at the four of them crowded into her small room. "We are not family yet," Zander said, then looked at Fiona. "Though I am hoping to change that soon." Fiona's heart jumped. "Zander, I know this is not the romantic proposal you deserve. I do not even have a ring yet. But sitting here with the people I love most, facing tomorrow, I do not want to wait." He took her hand. "Fiona Kennedy, you came back into my life when I needed you most. You taught me that success is not just about achievement, it is about connection. You made me want to be better, not just professionally but as a person. I love you more than I knew was possible. Will you marry me?" Fiona looked at her father, who was beaming. At Patricia, who had tears running down her face. At Zander, who looked terrified and hopeful and absolutely certain all at once. "Yes," she said simply. 1,000 times yes." The room erupted in celebration, nurses peeking in to see what the commotion was about. Zander kissed her thoroughly, and when they pulled apart, both were crying and laughing. "I am buying you the most ridiculous engagement ring," Zander promised. "Something totally over the top. I do not need ridiculous, I just need you." The surgeries went smoothly. Gerald's kidney was successfully transplanted into Patricia, and both patients recovered well. Within weeks, Patricia's color improved dramatically. Her energy returned. The doctors were cautiously optimistic that the transplant would give her many more years. Gerald healed quickly, proud of his surgical scars and the life he had helped save. He moved in with Fiona temporarily during his recovery, giving Zander an opportunity to prove himself as a future son-in-law. He cooked meals, helped with physical therapy exercises, and listened to Gerald's long stories about carpentry and raising Fiona with patience and genuine interest. "You have my blessing," Gerald told Zander one evening. "Not that you needed it since she already said yes. But I want you to know I think you are exactly what she needs." "I am the lucky one," Zander said. "She saved me long before I realized I needed saving." They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at a botanical garden. Patricia stood beside Zander as his best woman. Gerald walked Fiona down the aisle, and there was not a dry eye in the house. Fiona wore a simple cream dress and carried wildflowers. Zander wore a navy suit and could not stop smiling. "I was going to write elaborate vows," Zander said when it was his turn to speak. "But the truth is simple. Fiona, you taught me that kindness matters, that showing up matters, that being vulnerable is not weakness but strength. You saw potential in me when I was an angry teenager, and you see me clearly now as a man. I promise to choose you every single day. I promise to show up, even when it is hard. I promise to build a life with you that is full of color and laughter and love." Fiona was crying before she started speaking. "Zander, when I walked into that cafeteria, I was lost. Not just because of my father, but because I had forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen. You reminded me. You showed me that it is never too late to start again, to open your heart, to believe in possibilities. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word. I promise to challenge you and support you and love you fiercely. I promise to make our house a home and our life an adventure." When they kissed as husband and wife, their families cheered. The reception was joyful and intimate, full of dancing and laughter. Gerald gave a toast about the strange ways love finds us. Patricia spoke about second chances and the son she was so proud of. "He called me every single Sunday for 20 years, Patricia said, her voice strong and clear. "No matter where he was, no matter how busy, he never missed a call. That is the kind of man he is. Devoted, loyal, constant. Fiona, you are getting the best man I know." Later, during their first dance, Fiona whispered, "Are you happy?" "Happier than I knew was possible," Zander said, "though I have one more surprise for you." "I do not need any more surprises. Today is perfect." "This one is not for today, it is for our future." He pulled her closer. "I have been thinking about what you said, about balance and taking care of myself. I am stepping back from the day-to-day operations of the company. Promoting my COO to CEO, I will stay on the board and focus on research and development, but I want time for us, for the life we are building." Fiona pulled back to look at him. "Zander, that company is your baby. And it will always be important to me, but you are more important. The family we are going to build is more important. I spent 20 years proving I was successful. Now I want to spend the rest of my life proving I can be happy." They bought a new house together, something that belonged to both of them rather than just him. A craftsman-style place with a big kitchen and a garden where Fiona could grow vegetables. Gerald lived in the guest house, independent but close. Patricia visited every Sunday for dinner, bringing her famous lasagna and stories from her part-time job at the community center. Zander did step back from the company, and the transition was smoother than he expected. He consulted on new drug development and sat in on board meetings, but his days were no longer consumed by work. Instead, he and Fiona traveled, explored new hobbies, volunteered together at educational nonprofits. They talked about everything and nothing, built traditions and inside jokes, created a life that was rich in the ways that mattered. 18 months into their marriage, Fiona discovered she was pregnant. At 48, it was unexpected and slightly terrifying, but the joy outweighed everything else. Zander was over the moon, reading every pregnancy book he could find, talking to her belly about chemistry and kindness in equal measure. "I hope they have your brilliance," Fiona said one evening, Zander's hand on her growing stomach. "I hope they have your heart," Zander countered, "and your ability to see the best in people." Their daughter was born on a sunny May morning, healthy and loud and perfect. They named her Grace Patricia, honoring the women who had shaped their lives. Gerald cried when he held his granddaughter for the first time. Patricia declared her the most beautiful baby ever born and promptly spoiled her rotten. Watching Zander with their daughter, Fiona sometimes thought about that angry teenager in her chemistry class, the one who had thought the world had nothing to offer him. She thought about her own journey, the heartbreaks and detours that had led her exactly where she needed to be. "What are you thinking?" Zander asked one night, Grace asleep on his chest while they sat in the nursery. "I am thinking about that conversation we had in high school when I told you that you were wasting your potential. You were right, I was, but I was talking about chemistry. I did not know then that your real potential was this, being an incredible father, a devoted husband, a good man who chooses love every single day." Zander reached for her hand. "I learned from the best teacher. I was not teaching you that. Yes, you were. Every time you showed up for me when no one else did. Every time you believed in me when I did not believe in myself. You taught me what love looks like. It took me 20 years to understand the lesson, but I got there eventually." Grace stirred in her sleep, and Zander rocked her gently. Fiona watched them, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was not the life she had imagined for herself, but it was better than anything she could have planned. 3 years later, they welcomed twin boys, and their house became wonderfully chaotic. Zander worked from home most days, balancing research with diaper changes and playground visits. Fiona wrote a book about innovative teaching methods that became required reading in education programs across the country. They raised their children to be curious and kind, to value people over things, to understand that success meant different things to different people. Gerald lived to 92, long enough to teach his grandchildren woodworking and tell them embarrassing stories about their mother. Patricia made it to 86, fierce and independent until the end, the transplanted kidney giving her nearly 2 decades of quality life. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zander and Fiona returned to that hospital cafeteria. It had been renovated since their first meeting, brighter and more modern, but the memories remained. "Do you ever regret it?" Fiona asked. "Everything that happened, the fear and uncertainty, not for a second," Zander said firmly. "Every moment led us here, to this life, to our family, to us." "I love you more now than I did then," Fiona admitted. "I did not think that was possible, but you keep surprising me. That is my secret plan, surprise you for the rest of our lives." They kissed in that cafeteria, two people who had found each other across decades and circumstances, who had chosen love in the face of fear. A teacher who had seen potential in an angry teenager. A CEO who had reconnected with his childhood mentor and found not just gratitude but his soulmate. Two people who had learned that the best love stories are not about perfect timing or fairy tale beginnings, but about showing up and choosing each other, again and again, through every season of life. Their story was not conventional. It had started in a classroom 20 years before they were ready for it, resumed in a hospital cafeteria during the worst moments of their lives, and bloomed into something neither of them had expected. But it was real and deep and true, built on a foundation of respect and friendship that made everything else possible. As they walked out of the hospital hand in hand, back to the life they had built together, Fiona thought about all the ways love could find you. Sometimes it was dramatic and immediate, love at first sight that swept you off your feet. But sometimes it was quieter than that. Sometimes it was recognizing someone you had known before, seeing them with new eyes, and realizing they had been there all along, waiting for exactly the right moment to become something more. She squeezed Zander's hand, and he squeezed back, and no words were necessary. They had built a language of their own over the years, a way of communicating that went deeper than speech. They had built a family, a home, a life that honored where they had come from while embracing everything they had become. The evening sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as they drove home, where 3 children and a lifetime of memories waited. Grace would want to show them the painting she had made at school. The twins would demand a story before bed, probably the one about how Mommy and Daddy met, which they never tired of hearing. There would be laughter and chaos, and the beautiful ordinary magic of a family that chose each other every single day. And through it all, Fiona and Zander would face it together, the teacher and the student who had become so much more. Partners, best friends, lovers, parents. Two people who had learned that the greatest lessons in life are often the ones we do not expect, taught by the people who see us clearly and love us anyway. Their story was proof that it is never too late to start again, to open your heart, to believe in possibilities. That love can find you in the most unlikely places, during the darkest times, and transform everything. That the people who shape us when we are young might come back into our lives years later and shape us all over again in entirely new ways. As Zander pulled into their driveway and they saw their children's faces pressed against the window, waiting for them, Fiona knew with absolute certainty that every choice, every detour, every moment of joy and heartbreak had been worth it. Because all of it had led her here, to this man, to this family, to this life that was more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined. And that was the most important lesson of all. The one about love and patience and second chances. The one about showing up and staying present and choosing each other through everything life threw at them. The one that proved chemistry was not just about elements and equations, but about the mysterious force that drew two people together and kept them connected across time and circumstance, and every obstacle in between. That was the lesson that mattered most, and it was one they would spend the rest of their lives teaching their children, showing them through example what real love looked like. Not perfect, but present. Not easy, but worth it. Not a fairy tale, but something better. Real.